Hello everyone, Darkside Phil here. Another year has closed. Indeed, it is January 2024, and early on every year, I take the time to reminisce on the year that was in my classic annual year-end series here on DSP Gaming. Right now, we are going to begin with my first one of the year, which is the most disappointing games of 2023 countdown. Now, every year I do this countdown. I believe this is like my 13th or 14th straight year doing this countdown this way. And what I want to do briefly before we begin is explain the premise, because every year people have questions. They say, Phil, these are the worst games of the year, right? Right? Wrong. These are not the worst games of the year. You know, ultimately, if you want to talk about the worst games of 2023, you're going to bring up games like Gollum or Kong Skull Island or some broken indie game that someone played and paid for and it was trash and therefore, you know, it shouldn't even be mentioned. No, my countdown is different, and I've been doing the most disappointing games countdown for over a decade, okay? The reason this stands out is because the games in this list aren't necessarily horrible games. In fact, I'm going to outright tell you that many of the games in my most disappointing games listing this year are good games. The problem is the games failed for me for one of many reasons. I'm going to give you a couple of those. Like, for example, maybe a game was great, but then kind of fizzled out right in the middle. Maybe the game was monstrously overhyped and then didn't live up to the hype and the promises that it had told about before the game was originally released. Or there's a new running theme this year, and you're going to see in many of these picks, this is exactly the same thing that resonates and makes these games disappointing. Games that don't hold up to their current competition. This year, 2023, man, let me tell you something. A lot of the games that came out would have been perfectly fine for a previous year. But these games had direct competition this year that made it that they just weren't as good as they should have been because someone else completely outshined them. And so, this is going to be a very interesting countdown. Here's how it works. I'm going to play video of a said game, number it in the countdown, and talk for several minutes about why I feel that game belongs at that part in the countdown. Now, just to forewarn all of you, this is me playing my own videos from the year. They had a face cam. They had a leaderboard. So you might see double leaderboard. You might see this face cam and a face cam over there, or a face cam kind of half under me. It's not perfect, and sadly, there's just no real way to perfect this process. I've tried to doing better things over the years. There's just no real way to do it when you do my content with it already has a face cam and a leaderboard. It is what it is, all right? So please bear with it. This face cam is going to stay right here for the entire thing, so if you want to hear directly from me, look at this camera, okay? The other ones aren't really me. And the leaderboard at the bottom of the screen you see there in blue, that's the real leaderboard for the night. Speaking of which, this is an interactive stream as much as a countdown video for on-demand audience. So people will have the chance to chime in and say their opinions during tonight's stream. So let's say I'm going through number 10. I'm sure people will be saying stuff in the chat, and then when I'm done talking about number 10, I will go to the viewers and see if they have anything particular to say. If any contributions come in during this live stream, I will shout those out between each part. That way I can finish what I have to say about a particular game before I take in your opinions and contributions, okay? Particularly, actually right now, I just received a tip, so I'd like to shout that out before we actually begin with the countdown. It is a $30 tip from Haseo X, who says, let's see what makes the list and to see what how the chat and the viewers are going to react to that. That's right. And one other final thing, too, because this is kind of neat. I was just talking about this with my stream chat before I started for tonight. Right now, things are very different than how they used to be. Because, you know, I've been making content on YouTube for over 15 years. And this is one of my longest running series. The thing is, it used to be very easy to figure out what all my rankings were. Because I actually used to regularly put out game reviews. I would finish a game and immediately review it and give it a number score or whatever. So people would definitely know if I either loved a game or was disappointed with it. These days, you basically got to watch the raw playthrough. I haven't reviewed games formally in many, many years. So because of that now, everything's kind of up in the air. People are actually in the chat saying, I think he's going to say this. Maybe he'll say this. Maybe he won't. Do you think this will be at the top of the list or the bottom of the list? They don't know. That's why this series is cool now, because it is something completely fresh and different, and you can't really predict, all right? So, thank you all for being here tonight if you're here live. If you're watching this on demand, thanks for coming back to the channel. I know with all the changes and everything that have been happening recently, it can be a little hectic. I'm just happy to have everyone here for for the year-end series this year. All right? So, without further ado, I think it's time to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, just to go right in line with what I was saying, the number 10 most disappointing game of the year, so not super disappointing, but definitely had a level of disappointment for me, is actually a game that I thought was a very good game. And early on in 2023, it was a front runner for me for possibly my game of the year contenders. Ladies and gentlemen, the game I'm talking about is called Hogwarts Legacy. This was, for me, my first experience ever in an interactive Hogwarts universe. Okay? The graphics were quite good. To see an interactive Hogwarts Academy and then the town of Hogsmeade and everything around it in this 3D interactive map was amazing. I compared that to, say, the first time when I played South Park: The Stick of Truth, and you could actually see the town of South Park laid out in a big map, and you could spatially see geographically where everything was laid out. Well, that's exactly what this game was. Also, the combat, the magic was quite good. Take a look right now. Look at this. The mini games, the fun stuff that was in the game was very enjoyable. All right? So you may say, well, why on earth, with all these positives that you're saying about this game, right? Why would you say that this was in your most disappointing games of the year countdown? Well, there's a very good reason, all right? This game is very, very good for about the first 2/3 of the game. The questing, the character development, the story, the graphics, the gameplay, the spells you learn, the classes you attend. It feels like you're in an interactive Harry Potter universe. But the major problem for me was twofold. The first problem was directly a problem that the game developers, sadly, did not keep the good pacing and the entertainment value at the same level in the final third of the game. No exaggeration, when you get to that final third of the game, it's boring because you've learned all your spells. You have all your magic unlocked. You know how to fight. There's nothing left. There's actually an entire final third of the map that unlocks at the end of the game. And when you arrive there, you're like, oh, what is there to do? There's going to be all this new activity. No, it's the same exact activities you've done for the last 20 some hours, just again in order to beat the game. And that's incredibly disappointing. Like, ultra disappointing, because you're thinking there's more cool finale, and there really isn't a very good finale. And so for me, this game was disappointing because it didn't stay at that same level of pacing. At the end, it just fizzles out. But in addition to that, I think it would be crazy for me not to mention the insane amount of controversy that surrounded this game over the course of 2023, because the original creator of Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, has become a politically polarizing figure when it comes to things like trans rights and things like that. A lot of people absolutely hate this woman now for the things that she has said and done over the years. Now, this game was not made by J.K. Rowling. This game had no input from J.K. Rowling whatsoever. In fact, there is a trans character in Hogwarts Legacy that is represented very positively. Is a character that's positive and fun and has stories, story missions tied to them and stuff. Yeah, if anyone had actually played the game, they would know that. But there was this giant controversy all year about, oh, this game is bad because it's J.K. Rowling. And I'm sorry, I don't like politics in my video games. If I'm going to play a game, I want to enjoy it on its own merits. I don't want to have to hear a bunch of angry mob people on the internet whining about this or that about a game. And that's all I heard for several months when I played this game. I had to make a YouTube short explaining up front why I was playing Hogwarts Legacy. I don't think I've ever had to make a video explaining why I chose a video game ever in my 15-year history, but I had to do it to cover my ass, because God forbid I play Hogwarts Legacy and someone accused me of being a bigot because I'm somehow supporting J.K. Rowling by buying the game. It's absolutely ludicrous. So not only do we have a game that's absolutely amazing but then fizzles out in the last third, but then you have to put up with all the bullshit around you on social media and all the politics nonsense. It just makes a perfect storm of annoyance. So that's why, for me, Hogwarts Legacy is one of the most disappointing games of the year, but that's also why it ranks very, very low on the list. It's still a great game. And by the way, if you skipped Hogwarts Legacy because of all that nonsense, I strongly recommend you check it out. Did you know it was just announced it is the best selling game of 2023. Over 22 million copies sold. Over 2 million alone were sold in December on the Switch. So, obviously, the game's not the devil. It's quite good. The game's media probably didn't tell you that because they didn't cover the game, because they felt they had to boycott it because they don't like J.K. Rowling for political reasons. That doesn't mean the game is bad. I strongly recommend you give it a look. It's a good time, especially if you're a big Harry Potter fan. I think you're going to enjoy this game. Okay? All right. Thank God we got out of the political discourse, because already I can see in the chat people are arguing about it, and I don't want to fucking talk about that for the rest of tonight. We're done with that. Okay? We can move on now. Let's move on to my number 9 most disappointing game of the year, and some people will be absolutely shocked by this choice, but don't worry, I'm going to justify it. All right? Oh, by the way, DC says, Hogwarts Legacy reminded me of the Harry Potter movies. I like the movies and the game's awesome. I'll definitely give it a look. And then Haseo says, I loved playing Hogwarts so much, I replayed the game twice after. Wow, there you go. It's a great game. It really is. Okay, moving on. The number 9 game, I don't think anyone would have guessed this would have been on the list, but I gotta be honest. The game that is the number 9 most disappointing in 2023, the Dead Space remake. Yes. First of all, a lot of people forgot this game was 2023. They get it confused with the Callisto Protocol game that came out in December 2022. And a lot of people really loved the game. All right? I'm not saying I didn't love the game. In fact, it was one of my most solid first playthroughs of the new year. But there's a few problems with this game that ultimately, when I was done with my playthrough, all right, they just didn't. You're seeing one right now. You're literally seeing one on screen right now. Did you see that? Look. The cursed pants. There are bugs and glitches in this remake. This is supposed to be a full remake of the game from ground up. Then why are these ridiculous glitches like the invisible, unkillable pants in the game? Okay? And this is just one example of the many things that I ran into in this game that's supposed to be a polished AAA release. If you don't remember, there's a lot of controversy around this game. Why? Because the original creators of Dead Space don't work for EA anymore. They went off and made their own company, and then they made that game, Callisto Protocol. Well, a lot of people didn't like it, so when this game came out, they all acted like, oh, this game's the most flawless game ever. This game had tons of bugs. Invisible, glitched enemies, game crashes, graphical problems, soft locks where you have to reload a save to go back through because the game won't make progress. I mean, I'm showing them to you in a lot of ways here in this video, okay? Now, did Dead Space Remake have anything new in it? It did. There was a couple segments that were added to the game that weren't present in the original. For example, there was no anti-grav gameplay in the original Dead Space 1, okay? In this game, there is. There's free-moving anti-grav gameplay. That was an element that was actually introduced in Dead Space 2. And so, the fact that that was in Dead Space 1 made it feel a little bit new and refreshing, all right? And yes, I would say 1 or 2 of the boss fights was kind of remixed. But ultimately, this game, which is supposed to be a remake, by the way, here's another invisible enemy that I'm fighting. Isn't this delightful? Here's another one. This game that's supposed to be a remake, sadly doesn't hold up to the other remakes that have been coming out recently into the survival horror genre. For example, we had Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 remakes, all of which I would argue are kind of better than the Dead Space remake. And you may say, well, maybe Resident Evil 3 remake isn't. Okay, arguably you're right. But Resident Evil 2 remake, still to this day, is like the textbook case of an amazing modern survival horror game. Resident Evil 4 remake also came out this year and was far better than this game. This game, in my opinion, followed the original Dead Space far too closely and reused way too many gameplay elements, too many enemies. A lot of these rooms are absolutely identical. In fact, if you actually play Dead Space 1 and Dead Space Remake, only, I would argue, 10%, maybe 15% of the game is anything new. Most of it is exactly the same as the original. So if you never played the original, great. But if you did, should you really be paying $60 for this game? Actually, wasn't this $70 at launch? I can't remember the exact price point. But they were charging you premium dollar for a game that you've already played. They didn't add enough in. In fact, one of the things they added, get this, you can walk throughout the entire Ishimura ship. In the original game, you had to do traveling on the monorail to get from place to place. In this one, you could just walk from place to place. Wow, that really changed the experience. Not at all. You know what I mean? Like, not at all. It's just sad because so many people praised the crap out of this game, then said Callisto Protocol was bad. In reality, I don't think that's the case at all. This is just Dead Space 1 with a facelift. So if you like this, you're basically, you know, you love a game that's like 10, 15 years old, and that's fine. But don't say this brand new game is better than the other brand new game. It's not. It's literally reusing all the same gameplay elements and assets and everything that the dev team made, Visceral Games, made 15 years ago. So for me, I went into this game expecting everything new. I was like, wow, it'll be the same premise. The Ishimura's overrun with these aliens, but you're going to have all these new bosses, all these new experiences, all this new, and it just never happened. It felt exactly like playing Dead Space 1 again with a few minor tweaks and some better graphics. So for me, paying top dollar for a remake, then finding out literally it's really not a remake, it's more of a remaster, that's incredibly disappointing. At the end of the day, when I beat the game, I was like, man, it's up to you to make that judgment if you want to spend like $70 for a game that's literally the same as the first. But, you know, I still enjoyed playing it. But, you know, when you have, are you kidding me? I didn't even know, I swear I didn't know it happened a third time in this clip. I had no clue. You see this, right? It happened again. So that's what I mean. Like, that just kept happening over and over and over in the playthrough. It's like, and this is supposed to be a AAA $70 game? No, it wasn't. It was disappointing for me. Okay. So that was my number 9 pick for the most disappointing game. I swear to you, I had no idea that happened so many times in that pick, in that clip. I had no idea. Okay. So DC says, as an original Dead Space player, Dead Space 2023 looked sick. I actually played a good chunk of Callisto Protocol, reminded me of Callisto Protocol. I personally liked Callisto Protocol. I mean, so did I. I liked Callisto Protocol as well. I feel like so many people bandwagoned on the hate wagon for Callisto Protocol that when Dead Space came out, everyone, oh, Dead Space is amazing. Yeah, it's the same game you played 15 years ago. Like, you're praising a dev team who just used someone else's ideas and assets. It's this, you know what I mean? I think it got way too much praise. Would I recommend the original game? What's better? If you're gonna choose between the two, obviously play the modern version. It would be pretty dumb for you to go back and play the one with outdated graphics and it doesn't have the ability to walk through the ship and stuff. Obviously go for the better one. But is it worth $70? If you've already played the original, no, it's not. Okay? Darth Goldbox says, I think that Dead Space should have only been $40 or less. There you go. Okay. Let's continue, shall we? So that was number 9. Now we're hitting the number 8. Now this one is a very subjective one, okay? A lot of people I know for a fact actually really like this game. Personally, I didn't dislike this game. But at the same time, for the amount of time I had to sink into it to get through it and beat it, and for the amount that I got out of it, honestly, at the end of the day, I was pretty darn disappointed, especially because there was so much hype behind this game, and when it came out, it was just kind of fizzled. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the number 8 pick for the most disappointing game of the year for 2023 is Diablo 4. That is right. Diablo 4. So pay no attention to the man on the other side of the screen. He is a faker. He is not real. Block that part. Put your hand over your screens right now over that man. Okay? Diablo 4, man. Listen. I'm a fan, an old school fan of Diablo from the 1990s. I played Diablo 1 and 2. When 2 came out, it was a new release. I played it. I played the crap out of it. I loved it. I got addicted to it. I did several different runs of Diablo 2 in the 90s. Okay? I thought it was an outstanding game. And then Diablo 3 came out, which was over 10 years ago, if you're not aware. And when Diablo 3 came out, I was a YouTuber. And I was like, wow, I can cover this game for YouTube. This is going to be really neat because this is a game from my youth that now I can cover for an audience that likes what I do now on the internet. And when I played Diablo 3, people were bored. Like, really bored. Like, they hated the playthrough. And I was shocked because back then, you're talking, you know, what, 13 plus years ago? People liked everything I put out. So to have people outright tell me, we're actually disappointed, this playthrough sucks, it's boring, actually was like, wow, I wonder what happened here. Now, when Diablo 4 was coming out, I outright even told you guys I wasn't convinced to even get the game because Diablo 3 had not worked as a playthrough 13 plus years ago, and I was afraid that it was going to be kind of a dud, okay? So we actually talked about it, and you guys over time convinced me. You're like, no, You must play Diablo 4. If you don't play it, you're going to be missing out on one of the best games of the year. All right, fine. So I got Diablo 4, all right? Now listen, there is not actually any particular part of this game that I can tell you is bad. It's not the graphics, it's not the gameplay, it's not the story. In fact, I would argue that all those three things are pretty good. The problem is, Diablo 4, and to some extent Diablo 3, are basically games from a bygone era. And what I mean by that is these games are like games that maybe if they came out in the 1990s would have been Game of the Year, correct? The problem is it's the same kind of game, the same kind of formula. When you play it, it feels like you've played it before. Yes, there's gameplay tweaks, there's different, legacy elements in it that are fun, but it's legacy elements. Do you understand? This genre of game has advanced. In fact, as I was playing this game, there's people talking to me about, well, did you hear about this one or this one that came out in the last 5 years? It has like all these other elements that aren't in Diablo 4. I was like, no, I don't know anything about them. They're like, that would have been way better, right? If you had played those games, you would have probably had a better time with it because they have new things. That this game feels like a retro game with a modern facelift over it, right? And here's the thing, like, I didn't have any problem playing it. I don't really remember particularly struggling playing it, but at the same time, it took a long time to beat the story. And it's funny because I beat the story and people were like, so are you going to do the post game? I was like, the post game? We were all saying that this game was too long in the main story. And now you think that I'm going to be doing post game streams of it and stuff. It didn't really catch any kind of traction with my viewing audience. After I had beaten the story, I had zero desire to go back and do any of the post game content that was unlocked. It's just kind of a one and done, do the story, get out of it. Now, for a game that was so hyped, because again, every time that Activision Blizzard has this new game come out, especially one of their tried and true franchise games, it's like, oh my god, the Messiah has returned and is coming down from the sky, which is ironic because it's a game about demons, so maybe it's Satan's returning from the underworld or something, right? But the point I'm making is everyone's convinced you've got to play this. It's must play. If you don't play it, you're missing out. You're going to miss one of the best games of the year. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm skeptical. You guys convinced me to play it. I play it, and it was dead on exactly as I expected. It plays like Diablo. It looks like Diablo. It feels like Diablo. It's just Diablo. But it's 20 years, like, too late to be interesting. You know what I'm saying? So maybe if I was an online co-op player, and I had a group of friends that loved Diablo, and we went into the post-game challenge dungeons, and we were doing seasonal content afterward, maybe then, all right, I would have gotten more out of this, and I would have absolutely been in love with it. But for someone just playing through the campaign, it's just not it. It's not. I felt like it was more of kind of a waste of time. At the end of the day, I couldn't tell you what happened in the story of this game. And I did a full playthrough of the story. I don't know. You want to know what we did? I kept pressing a button on my controller like this. And I killed a lot of stuff. That's Diablo 4. I killed probably 40,000 enemies, and that's all I can really remember about the game. So, it is what it is. It was disappointing to me because I was convinced by the audience. You guys said, no, you don't understand. This is going to be great. It really didn't do anything for me. It didn't do anything for you. It should have been better, especially if you're a flagship title from Activision Blizzard. They got to do better. There was no innovation, nothing to write home about, just kind of meh, and meh means disappointing in my book. So there you go. I had a feeling a lot of people didn't know that would be in my countdown either. So there you go. Okay? All right. We're 3 in. How do you guys think about the first 3? You agree, disagree? DC says, I played a bit of Diablo 3. It was fun. I never played Diablo 1, 2, and 4. I'm neutral with your entry. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. No other takes? I think some people were agreeing with me. So, that's good. Okay. 1000% disagree. Well, it's a good thing this is my countdown, not yours. There you go. You have the right to disagree, and that's personally fine. It's absolutely personally fine. You know, everyone, it's different strokes for different folks. Everyone has different personal preferences. If you love Diablo 4, good for you. At least you feel like you got your money's worth, right? Okay. Shall we move on? Radical Jaw says, I agree with you. It was just mid. And Carlos says, I'm actually surprised it's this low. For me, it was like the 5th most disappointing game of the year. Wow. No, what I heard is that for hardcore Diablo fans, they were more disappointed than me. because they played the post-game content. They didn't like that either. And then apparently they rebalanced the game right after that, and they hated that. It was like everything that came out was disappointing to Diablo fans, so maybe I actually didn't even dislike it as much as most others. Who knows, right? Okay, let's continue on. For the record, no contributions that I can see. If you guys do contribute and I'm not shouting it out, let me know that I missed it. I've been having some issues with PayPal notifications and stuff like that. I want to make sure to give you your gratitude and not me skipping stuff. So, all right, continuing on. The number 7 most disappointing game of the year for me out of this entire list that I'm staring at right now, I can absolutely positively confirm to you, ladies and gentlemen, number 7 on the list is the most rage-inducing playthrough that I did in 2023. I was screaming my head off every moment that I was playing this game. I was getting so upset, and I actually wanted to quit. The game that I'm speaking of, ladies and gentlemen, of course, is Wo Long Fallen Dynasty. Pay no attention to the jackass on the other side of the screen. So Wo Long Fallen Dynasty, everybody. Let me tell you guys something about this game. All right? This is a game with an identity crisis. It doesn't want to be Dark Souls. Does it want to be Neo? Does it want to be Dynasty Warriors? It's hard to tell, all right? It looks nice, except as you can see just right now, you can see that there's some fluctuation in the frame rate and choppiness in the graphics of this game, correct? This game is difficult. It's actually quite difficult, which is fine if you play this style of FromSoft knockoff type game. The problem with Wo Long is twofold. Number 1, the game design forces you to explore every nook and cranny of every single map, because the way that you level up in the game is to actually hit these little flag outposts, and when you hit them, you put your flag up and you actually gain like in-game experience for that level. If you don't hit every little flag in a level, you're too weak to beat it. You get to the boss and you'll be so weak you can't kill the boss. So the game artificially, by design, forces you to do over-exploration, grinding, and leveling that in any other game of this style you wouldn't have to do. Maybe you say, I don't need to fight everything over here. I'll just skip that segment. I'll go over here. In this game, no, you're absolutely positively forced to explore every nook and cranny of every map, and it just feels like a big waste of your time, all right? It really doesn't respect your time at all in that regard. Now, for me, and this is going to be a subjective thing based on my experience, I played Wo Long Fallen Dynasty on the Xbox Series X, okay? I don't know about anyone else's experience playing this on any other platform, but it was an Xbox Game Pass game, so that's why I played it on there. Let me tell you, this game performs very poorly on the Series X. At least it did back, what was it, March or April when it came out at launch. There were entire boss fights where the frame rate would dip into the 20s. Not even 30 frames per second, the 20s. And the game actually expected you, as part of the gameplay mechanics, to be able to parry perfectly the attacks the enemy was doing with a frame rate that would go 60, 40, 20, 30, 20, 60, 20, 40, 20, 60. How the hell am I supposed to time my parry? Are you out of your mind? Every time that the frame rate dipped, it was impossible to play the game. And this would happen over and over and over in the playthrough, making it artificially way more difficult than it should have been. All right? If they just found a way to make the game run worth a shit on the Xbox, then this would have been a much better game and a much better playthrough. And it's funny because when the game looks good, as you're seeing right now, it actually looks pretty darn beautiful, does it not? But then when that frame rate tanks at a critical moment, when you're in a boss fight or a big, you ran halfway across the stage and you're about to unlock that next flag and get a checkpoint, and then you die because the frame rate went do-do-do-do-do. You want to rip your hair out. You want to punch the screen. You want to take your controller and snap it in half, because that's the kind of game it is, okay? So, for me, this game wasn't a badly designed game in the combat. It wasn't badly designed in the visuals. The problem was they wanted you to act like it was a flawless game and play it as if it was some kind of an amazing experience when it wasn't. Having a frame rate that's dipping makes it not fun to play. And then on top of that, having to go to every flag post, like you just saw there, in every stage in order to even make proper progress, It made me so infuriated. So you knew a game that pissed me off the most this year was definitely going to be the game that I was going to have in my most disappointing countdown, all right? You might say, well, if this is the case, why isn't this even higher on your list, right? Here's why. I didn't really have high expectations for Wolong to begin with. So although I was disappointed with it, I wasn't that disappointed. This isn't like the worst game of the year for me or anything, because I kind of went into it with, if it's good, it's good. If it's not, it's not, because it was a Game Pass game. If I had dropped $70 on this thing, and then I was having these issues, I would have been even more infuriated. And it probably would have been way higher up the list. Luckily for them, it wasn't. So, Wolong Fallen Dynasty. Is it a fun game? Yeah, it is for the most part when it works. I actually heard that certain ports of the game are much better than the Xbox version. So maybe if you played this on a different platform, you had a better experience than me. But I don't like the game design of having to hit all the flag points. I don't like the dipping frame rate and the awful response of parrying when that happens. So for me, very disappointing and not worth playing, quite frankly. I toughed my way through that one because you guys absolutely wanted to see me finish it. You loved the rage, so I did finish it. But man, I literally wanted to quit it multiple times during the playthrough. Haseo says, thank God you didn't end up as one of the people who just throw a controller at their TV and damaged it. Yeah, I certainly learned, you know, from back in the day, smashing my controller on the table and breaking it during, like, a God of War game. I learned my lesson. DC says, as a Neo player, I thought Wolong was going to be good. When I watched the playthrough, yeah, my disappointment is immeasurable. My day was all ruined. I'm glad I didn't actually get that game. There you go. Jay says, I'd love to see Star Wars on this countdown. Well, maybe. I guess we'll have to see. Right now, it's number 7. We still have many more to go. Let's not spoil, shall we? Okay. All right. Cool. So I think as everyone's... Oh, wait a minute. There was a super chat came in from Anime Fan 565. They said, I wouldn't be surprised if Star Wars is on the list. Oh, I guess Anime Fan was actually of the same mind as Jade here. Saying that. Well, we'll see. No spoilers. All right, but let's get Anime Fan up on the leaderboard. Cool. Okay. Let's keep it moving. We're about a third through our countdown. Okay, everybody? Up next... This next game, again, I know will be controversial, and a lot of people are going to give me crap for having it on here. At the very same time, for those who actually watch my playthrough of this game, you probably absolutely expected it to be on this list, okay? This is a game that, in another parallel multiverse dimension, all right, probably would have been a Game of the Year high-end contender, and maybe even my pick for Game of the Year. I'm not kidding you, all right? But we live in this dimension. We don't live in that other multiverse. In this dimension, all things considered and comparing it to everything going on and everything around and the history of this franchise, I gotta tell it like it is. Ladies and gentlemen, my number 6 most disappointing game of 2023 is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. People already guessed in the chat that this is what it was going to be. Before I even begin, I'd like you to take a look at this video footage and tell me what's wrong. Seriously. Do you notice a distinct difference between this game and all the other games that I've already shown you in the countdown? I don't even have to, explain it. What's up with the fucking frame rate of this game? It's supposed to be a brand new AAA release in 2023, and it runs like shit on the Switch. It's a Switch exclusive that runs like shit on the Switch. The frame rate is sub 30 frames per second for most of the game, and God forbid you get a bunch of enemies coming at you at once. That sucker chugs along, okay? Very frustrating. Very frustrating. Now, someone just said, are you sure this is the right game? Oh, I'm sure this is Tears of the Kingdom. Trust me. You can see the attachment of the orb on his shield, all right? Now, what is it about Tears of the Kingdom that disappointed me? Well, first of all, I want to make this very clear. Tears of the Kingdom is not a bad game. Tears of the Kingdom is a good game. Tears of the Kingdom is above average game. Tears of the Kingdom, likely, as I said, in another universe or multiverse, would have been one of my Game of the Year contenders, if not my Game of the Year pick. But here's the deal. There's another game that came out on the Switch. It's called Zelda Breath of the Wild. I don't know if you've heard of it, okay? And basically, it's the same game, all right? Now, you're right if you want to say, wait a minute, hold on. What are you saying it's the same game? Tears of the Kingdom was the first open world Zelda and had all these modernized elements for parkour and climbing and all this. But Tears of the Kingdom is so much better because it has the overworld in the sky where you can do sky puzzles, and there's the underworld where you can explore a whole map underground as well. By the way, didn't you know that the amazing physics of the puzzle elements in this game are awesome? And by the way, I purposely picked this clip for this moment you're about to see right now. There we go. This was my most rage-inducing moment of the playthrough when that happened to me. I picked this clip on purpose. All right? So, admittedly, the game has some interesting elements to it. I actually enjoyed the crafting that was new for this game and how you had to use the new physics and crafting elements to solve tons of puzzles, and that made it feel innovative. It absolutely did. In fact, that's why this is only number 6 on this countdown and not like number 1 most disappointing, because there were some really good positives about this game, okay? But I'm sorry, the negatives of this game absolutely outweighed the positives for me. Here's why. When you're playing this game, you'll very quickly realize this is the same map as Breath of the Wild. The entire overworld's identical. There's a few tweaks here or there that are a little different, but it's the same map. You've already done it. Sometimes you go to a previous area from Breath of the Wild and there's not anything going on there anymore because they didn't even bother to populate it with anything interesting in the sequel. Okay? When you go to the underworld, at first it's interesting, and then you realize it's just a dark area with a bunch of areas you can't go because it's all poison. And it's not very interesting at all. It's actually quite repetitive, very annoying to navigate. There is a dungeon down there, but for the most part, it's not that interesting. It's very annoying. Then there's the sky temples. Well, it's nice to have a whole new area to explore, but it's just a bunch of aerial puzzles, a little bit of gliding. Nothing too special, quite frankly. Everything that they claimed was something that they were adding in felt like something you've already done before. The only innovative thing about this game, honestly, is the new building and crafting and the physics engine attached to it. Is it fun? Yes. Is it enough to sell you the same game a second time? In my opinion, no. That one element that was unique from the first game is just not enough for me to be ultra excited about Tears of the Kingdom. Now, let's also be very honest about this game. This game has a lot of content. This game has a ton of content. This was the very first Nintendo game that they charged you $70 for. Do you remember that? How hot and contentious it was that they were going to charge actual $70 for a game on the Switch, and people were up in arms. And then the game came out, and they're like, well, you don't understand. See, there's the sky world, the ground level, the underworld, all this exploration and content. To which I was playing the game, and I was like, all right, so fair enough. I can kind of see where they're coming from when it comes to the amount of content. But the more that I played in the game, I realized something very, very important. The vast majority of the content of this game has absolutely no meaning. It's just there to say there's more content, but you don't have to do any of it. Okay? For me, playing through the main story, getting all of the glyphs that were on the hillsides and things like that to get the full story of Zelda and her time travel mechanics and stuff like that, getting the Master Sword, and then basically beating the game, explained everything in the game that I needed to know. I'm aware there was other things I could have been doing, but I didn't really need to do them. There's giant dragon bosses that are optionally in the map you never need to fight and add nothing to the game, but they're there. There's underworld bosses. They're there. You don't ever have to touch them. You can skip the vast majority of content of the game, still enjoy it, and still get the story. That's a problem. There was one description that I gave this game when it was out, and a lot of people had issue with. I said it was called bloat. This game suffers from bloat. The game designers wanted to put so much in it to claim it was worth $70, but on actual face value, most of the content in the game doesn't have value. It's just there to say it's there. You can go do it if you want, but it's not meaningful. If you can get the entire story just by doing the main dungeons, the glyphs, getting the Master Sword, and you can skip all the optional stuff, then what's the value of it? Zero. All there is this padding to say the game has content that's worthless. It's equivalent to fetch quests or other boring repetitive stuff in other styles of RPG. Just that this time, it was in a Nintendo game, so I guess we're all supposed to just give it a pass, right? It's frustrating to me because Breath of the Wild, I enjoyed way more than Tears of the Kingdom. And in a world where Breath of the Wild didn't exist, this game would have been amazing. But they directly made the decision to make a sequel to Breath of the Wild so they could pump out another Zelda game on the same console generation, and reuse the same assets to make the game. They cut corners to make money. And it shows when you're playing this game and the frame rate is absolutely terrible and the game's response in combat is not great and you have all these repetitive tasks to do that mean absolutely nothing. That shows. They actually got lazy making this game, and that's sad. Nintendo usually is the polar opposite of being lazy. But I feel like this game shows they just wanted to push out another game before this console gen ended, and that's incredibly disappointing to me. Oh, by the way, did I mention that they retconned the entire story of Breath of the Wild? You literally could have never played Breath of the Wild, played this one, and you missed nothing, even though it's a sequel. They retconned it all, as if it never happened. And people are like, well, no, they didn't. Yes, they did, because they never mention it. In the game, they never mentioned the plot of the first game at all, as if it never happened. You don't need to know anything about it. So it's just like, wow. Now, here's the thing. I compare this to, for example, Assassin's Creed Origins and Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valhalla. Odyssey and Valhalla, people are like, it's too much of the same. But the truth is that Odyssey and Valhalla did have new content and refined the formula of Origins. The problem was it was too many of the same game back to back, so it feels like they just pumped out the same game 3 times. If only Valhalla had come out and not Origins or Odyssey, everyone would have said, oh my god, Valhalla is such an insanely groundbreaking game. That's exactly the problem with Tears of the Kingdom. If Breath of the Wild never existed, this game would be absolutely knock you on your butt insanely good. But sadly, Breath of the Wild came out, was an outstanding, amazing Game of the Year contender game, and now this game just felt like more of the same with a few things thrown at you. So sadly, I did not like Tears of the Kingdom as much as most. It is one of my most disappointing games of the year because of that. Maybe you guys disagree, and if you do, more power to you. You absolutely have the abilities to disagree, but that's my take. All right, we are now halfway through the countdown. Nikita has arrived and is gifting bombs of 50 memberships each. We just received 2 different membership bombs of 50 memberships on the chat tonight. So everyone who's here is apparently going to get a membership because we just got 100. All right, that's absolutely insane. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait because they take a while on YouTube to get applied. So right now 37 have been applied and it's slowly hitting. You guys are going to see nonstop in the bottom down there. That message probably won't disappear for like a half an hour now. Okay, thank you so much, Nikita. Nikita just dropped another 50 memberships on the chat. So 150 memberships tonight. Can you believe it? So congrats to everyone who's getting, there's too many names for me to shout out in the countdown, and the countdown must continue. Thank you, Nikita, for supporting DSP Gaming. Nikita just dropped another 50 memberships on the chat. If all 200 of those memberships stick, we are actually about to hit the record high number of members that we've ever had in this channel. That would be the most, because if we're over 1,000, I think we just had over 1,000, like 1,030 or something. We're at 1,070 something. That's the most we've ever had on DSP Gaming. So let's see if they actually divvy out. I will check on that and let you guys know. Right now we're at 75 and climbing, so I'll let you know if they all get handed out or not. Sometimes YouTube doesn't hand them all out. We'll find out. Thank you so much, Nikita, for your support tonight. Okay, let's move on because we still have the rest of the countdown to get through, okay? Here we go. And by the way, DC, I apologize. I know you tried to say something. There was absolutely no way that I could see it because the chat is going absolutely insane with so many people getting gifted memberships. People are going crazy in the chat over it. Carlos says the game runs 3 times better in emulators. I really hope Nintendo comes with a decent console next gen, or people I know will go with emulators. You're right. Zelda ran much better on an emulator than on the Switch. On the Switch, it was pathetic. It really was pathetic. So that's very sad. And I do hope that Nintendo learns their lesson. But again, I have to call out fan behavior. When the fans keep rewarding Nintendo for bad behavior, they'll never change. Zelda sold tons. So despite the game running like crap on the Switch, it sold tons. Why would Nintendo have incentive to do better? They don't need to. DC, he said, I loved your emphasis on the orb attached to his shield. That was funny. I never was a fan of the Zelda games, so that's my 2 cents. There you go. I am a fan of the Zelda games, quite frankly. That's why I'm just disappointed that this game really felt like it wasn't a real new Zelda game. So, okay. Let's continue on. Thank you. Again, those pop-ups are going to continue for quite some time. Thank you, Nikita. Amazing. All right. The number 5 game on this countdown, honestly, I think I'm more sad about this one than any other game on the countdown. I'm actually, like, legitimately sad about this game. And the reason I'm sad about this game is because it's a good game. It's a damn good game. I would actually argue the game I'm about to talk about is better than the game it's a sequel of. All right? It's better than the original. But this game had such a problem at launch that was not properly addressed that this game ended up being one of the most frustrating game experiences that I had all year long. Ladies and gentlemen, my number 5 pick for most disappointing game of 2023 is Star Wars Jedi Survivor. And you might say, really? Yeah. You might not remember because this is one of the releases that came out relatively early in the year. What was it, like March or April? I think maybe April-ish. And basically this game is a direct sequel to Star Wars Fallen Order from a few years ago. It's awesome. Open world exploration, a tougher style of Star Wars game that a lot of people said is kind of like FromSoft. I don't think it's quite that tough, but it's got cool parkour, optional puzzles, great story elements, and it's a really solid game. You can even see when the visuals are working beautifully, this game is amazing, okay? The problem is, and by the way, I apologize because I tried to find the clip and I did not save it, this particular one. This game has certain parts that run incredibly poorly, okay? Really bad. The game screams lack of polish. But when I say that, here's what I mean. Tanking frame rates to the point where, similar to Wolong Fallen Dynasty, this game is fully playable, and all of a sudden you go to fight a certain group of enemies in a room, and your frame rate goes from what was supposed to be 60 down to like 10, 20, and you can't react to anything going on in the game. How am I supposed to play an ultra difficult game where everything I do is delayed because it doesn't run well on the platform it's on, okay? In addition, this game has tons of game bugs. There was game bugs where I would open a chest and try to look at an item, and it would crash the game and force me to replay 10 minutes of gameplay because you can't manually save in this game. It's based on checkpoints. That's not good. There were parts where there were enemies that floated and the physics glitched and all kinds of issues like that, all right? Now, the real sad fact is that the game is great. The story, in my opinion, is much better than the story of Jedi Fallen Order. It's a much better sequel. It has elements that are, the graphics are better. The gameplay elements are better. There's way better combat in this one, okay? There's companions that come with you in various different places. Look, you have dual sabers. You have all these different stances that you can do, and they're absolutely fun and amazing. So my question is, of all those things going for it, okay, because there's a ton of positives going for it, why is the game devs, would they have released this game in the state it was at when it came out? Because they knew they had a winner on their hands with a better, again, better plot, better elements of gameplay, better graphics, better puzzles, better parkour. Why would you then release it to run like crap in certain parts? Why not give it a little bit more time to get polished, to run better? Why? I mean, Jade actually just called it out in the chat. He says, I feel sick when I watch this game. He's right. There were people who were getting motion sick from me playing it because it would go from 60 frames to 20 to 30 frames to 10 to 40. When your frame rate is going up and down, it actually makes certain people sick. So how are you supposed to enjoy the game exactly? You know what I'm saying? Like, what was going on here? They don't know what they were doing. They made an amazing game, and they ruined it by not polishing it at all. From what I'm to understand, okay, the game actually runs much better today. But here's the thing. I actually wanted to give the game a fair shake, because when I was playing it, I was actually really enjoying it until I was running into these parts that were almost unplayable, all right? So I actually, get this, suspended my playthrough, and I almost never do that. If you go back in my 15 years as a creator, I almost would never put a playthrough on hiatus and then promise to come back later because something was wrong with the game. I did. And then I went back to it maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks later, when the game devs had promised they had patched the game and made it better. Nothing was improved. It was the same issues, I just basically toughed through it really badly to finish it, and it was so disappointing having all those bugs, glitches, and visual issues. This is sad because this seems to be a new pattern with outstanding games. They are not fully explored or appreciated by a mainstream audience because the game runs like shit, and then it goes viral that the game runs like shit, and now no one's going to buy your game. I wouldn't be surprised if this game was absolutely polished at launch, this would have been a game that at the end of the year, everyone was talking about as a Game of the Year contender. Instead, did you hear a single person at all mention this game, Jedi Survivor, at the end of the year as a Game of the Year contender? Nothing. Everyone had completely forgotten about this game as if it never existed because of its issues. And that's absolutely positively sad. Because again, that's why this is number 5 on my list and not lower. Because I thought the game was great. When I beat it, I was like, my God, the ending was amazing. Why does no one talk about the game? Because it runs like shit. They need to stop doing this. Whoever it is, whether it's the person in charge, the management, the publisher, whoever's putting the pressure on these studios has to cut the shit and say, listen, take the time to make the game good and run well because we don't want you to come out with a game that gets forgotten. It's super good, and probably today, all right, it's much better. But this is 8+ months later. Who's talking about Jedi Survivor? No one. First impressions are everything, man. And the first impression was this game was a broken mess, and that's why the game is forgotten and one of my most disappointing games of the year by far. All right. So it looks like perhaps those gifted memberships have gone through. Indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, there were 200 memberships have counted. That means we have now hit a new record. 1,078 members here on DSP Gaming. That is by far the most I've ever had. Thank you so much to Nikita for the hundreds and hundreds of gifted memberships over the last couple of days. Thank you to everyone else who also is a member and everyone who supports my content in this channel. I really, really appreciate it. Hitting a record here tonight was not something that I was expecting. So thank you so much for that. Okay. Ladies and gents, I received a $15 tip from Gabriel, who says, let's get it. Thank you very much, Gabriel, for the $15 tip tonight. I very much appreciate that. Let's get that up on the leaderboard. In the meantime, DC says, with all due respect, I played Jedi Survivor on the PS5. Hold on. And I never, let alone, encountered any bugs or lower frame rate. I lucked out. You're right. In fact, he's right. And since we're still in the countdown, we should call this out. Apparently, the PS5 was the only version that didn't have many issues. PC was utterly broken at launch, and the Xbox had the issues that I addressed because I played the Xbox Series X version. So it was only the PS5 version of this game that didn't have issues at launch. But again, you notice, even though the PS5 version played perfect, you notice absolutely nobody talked about this game after its launch, as if it never existed. First impressions are everything, folks. Okay. Hooey. Good stuff. Now we're getting to the nitty-gritty, everybody. Now we're getting down to the really disappointing games, okay? Now we're getting down to the ones that, man, I kind of wish they didn't come out. You know what I'm saying? I kind of wish these games didn't release because they're such disappointments. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Anime Fan. Anime Fan did another super chat and said, fun fact that games are canon to the Star Wars lore. Yeah, I heard that, right? That they actually are supposed to be canon to the Star Wars movies and stories and stuff, which is kind of neat. Shout out to 672. 672 gifted a membership, and it went to Thunderlips, right? And thank you to Gabriel. He gifted a membership. That one went to Morbidly Obese. So now, technically, we're at 1,080 and climbing. We're still hitting new records here tonight. Thank you all for your support tonight. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, number 4 most disappointing game of the year. I had said something earlier. When we started this playthrough, I said there are a few running patterns. This game by far suffers as a victim of one of those running patterns. 2023 was the year where certain games that came out far exceeded expectations. They blew it out of the park. And when they did, all of a sudden, some companies started shaking in their boots, right? Why? Because they realized that they were making games in direct competition, and their games weren't holding a candle to the competition. Do you see what I mean? There's some games that came out in 2023 that, if they had released in another year, would have been amazing. We're like, oh my God, that's a superb game. But because something else came out the same year, they don't look so good at all. and it ended up making those games look very bad in comparison and a bad value and just not up to par with what people now wanted. So, my number 4 most disappointing game of 2023 is Mortal Kombat 1, which of course is incredibly confusing at first because the title is the same as the name of the original game from the 1990s. I hate when they do that, when they rename something and act like it's a reboot or whatever. They already did that with Mortal Kombat 9, and now they're doing it again, a second reboot of the franchise. So right from the get-go, the premise is a little confusing and not very good. All right, take a look at what it says right there. Did you see what it said for the ping? 108 milliseconds, right? Or 5, or whatever it said. This is an online competitive fighting game. The visuals look pretty good. Take a look at the graphics. That ain't bad. But the problem is, look at it now. When you start playing this game online, you immediately notice a huge problem. The connections are laggy. This game has the same netcode connections as arguably the last 2 Mortal Kombats. But the 2 Mortal Kombats came out many, many years ago. In addition, this game has a very basic gameplay setup. For those who don't know competitive fighting games, you're going to have no idea what I'm talking about right now, okay? But the major premise of the fighting in this game is a high-low mix-up. What that means is sometimes you have to block a move high, sometimes you have to block a move low, and sometimes you have to read your opponent's inputs and change from blocking high to low in order to properly defend. This game is so laggy online, you can't actually block a high-low mix-up. So people playing it online literally abuse this and just say high-low kick into a juggle, high-low kick into a juggle. You can't do anything about it. You literally just lose to certain characters because you can't react to what they're doing, okay? This is supposed to be a competitive fighting game, and this is how it was released. Now, that was only at release, but more and more issues ended up being revealed with the game over time. First of all, I played through the entire story mode. And I actually like the narrative modes of these NetherRealm games. NetherRealm is the game developer. I think they do an outstanding job with their story modes, okay? However, I will tell you this. What ended up happening with Mortal Kombat 1 is they decided to do a story mode that copied the Marvel Universe. What do I mean? A multiverse concept. And that multiverse concept was such a copy of the Marvel Universe that it didn't feel fun or original. It just felt like they were late to the game doing a multiverse concept. And what happens with a multiverse is you end up feeling like nothing that's going on is meaningful. Because at any time, let's say someone who's your favorite character dies, right? Well, with the multiverse concept, what ends up happening is the character could just come back anyway. It's just from another universe. So who cares if your favorite character dies? They'll walk right through another portal and be back into the game. Do you see the point I'm making? So multiverse doesn't work for a game like Mortal Kombat because now none of your characters are ever at risk of being gone from the franchise because they can just walk right back onto the screen. It's no big deal. Okay? So the story ended up really strong and ends horribly with this multiverse plot that was a real fail. In addition, get this. After this game was only out for about 2 to 3 weeks, not the game developers at NetherRealm, but the players themselves discovered a horrible game-breaking bug that made the game completely unbalanced and unfair. They discovered that player 1 or 2, because forgive me, I forgot which one it was, had a huge advantage over the other player. On one side of the screen, you would go to do a combo, and your combo would pass right through the enemy and not hit them. But the person on the other side of the screen could easily perform their combo every time and it would hit. It was a hitbox bug, depending on what side of the screen you're on. That's completely ridiculous and unacceptable in any kind of a competitive environment. It has to be equal footing. And this was discovered about 3 weeks into the game by players, not by the game developers. The game developers had no clue it even existed. Did they not play test the game or even understand their own gameplay elements? How did they miss this? So they quickly patched it or whatever. But the funny part about it was tournaments had already happened. So entire weeks of tournaments, the results really didn't mean anything. They were worthless because it was unfair. It wasn't an equal playing advantage. So the story is awful and ruins the franchise. The online play is far too laggy to catch up with basically what they're trying to do with the game. And then on top of that, the game had a game-breaking bug that made it completely unbalanced, unfair, and broken at launch. To make matters even worse for Mortal Kombat 1, all right? The big problem was that Street Fighter 6 came out this year. And when Street Fighter 6 came out, all right, it basically completely changed the game for the industry. The absolute best online connections, a great online ranking system, a wide variety of characters and gameplay styles, and introducing an insane amount of new gameplay elements. Mortal Kombat 1 didn't do any of that. It was just a high-low mix-up game with some assist characters coming out. It played almost exactly like previous Mortal Kombats and didn't really innovate at all. So imagine your direct competitor just a few months before your new release has groundbreaking internet connectivity, amazing gameplay elements, the likes of which you've never seen before. They're introducing a ton of new gameplay things that have never even been a part of their franchise, and they're blowing it out of the park on every single level, and then you release an incredibly subpar game, right? Really, Mortal Kombat 1 is not a bad game. The problem is it's just par for the course of what you would expect from Mortal Kombat. It doesn't innovate. It doesn't feel like a new iteration. It almost feels like an expansion from Mortal Kombat 11, and that's a problem. Any other year, this game might have felt like an awesome complete package. But Street Fighter 6 came out last year, and Street Fighter 6 literally at every corner upstaged Mortal Kombat 1. Didn't have a game-breaking bug at launch, had all these new gameplay elements to innovate in, had the best online play in the business. When this game came out, it felt like you were playing a children's game compared to what you could play with Street Fighter 6, and it just lost its luster right away. If you want to confirm everything that I'm saying right now, okay, take a look at the player bases for the two games. Street Fighter 6 has massively dwindled, but everyone's hype. People are still streaming the game, talking about it. Mortal Kombat 1 is all but dead. Like, no one talks about it. Almost no one's streaming it. Their tournaments, no one cares. Street Fighter 6 is at the top of the competitive scene, and Mortal Kombat 1, just a few months in, is dead, and no one cares. The only time they talk about it is when a DLC character releases. Oh, Homelander's in it now, so everyone go and play it for a week, and then it's dead again. Okay? So, yeah, Mortal Kombat 1. I was honestly hoping that 2023 was going to be very similar to a year back in the day. If you remember, Street Fighter 4 came out, and it completely reinvigorated the entire fighting game community. Then all of a sudden, you had Mortal Kombat 9 and a new Tekken and another new fighting game. And within a span of 2-3 years, it was like the renaissance of fighting games, right? It really looked like 2023 was going to be the renaissance of fighting games. But then Street Fighter 6 came out, and then everyone's like, oh shit, can Mortal Kombat even stand a chance? And the answer is no. It's like they didn't even try. They paid no attention to their direct competitor. They didn't try to even implement the elements that Street Fighter 6 had. They just didn't care. They just released another kind of blasé mid Mortal Kombat game. And when your competitor has knocked it out of the park, you can't release a mid game. You have to try to stay in competition. And sadly, they have not. There you go. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We have 3 left, the top 3. Matthew did a super chat and said, evening, Phil. I always look forward to this time of year, and I do agree with you that Jedi Survivor was great, but it should have been handled better with all of those glitches. Exactly. Again, amazing game, handled incredibly poorly. It's going to disappoint the gamer base, and then no one talks about it ever again. And, you know, with Mortal Kombat, again, if Mortal Kombat truly was a great game, would people not be still talking about it? Would you not see tons of people streaming the game? That game died like right away within a few weeks. It was like gone again. Everyone went right back to Street Fighter 6, and now everyone's just waiting for Tekken. No one's talking about Mortal Kombat 1 as if it never existed. That's pretty sad. DC says, this is a gut and a heart wrencher. I love watching you have fun on Mortal Kombat. NetherRealm dropped the ball on the game. Man, what a sad excuse of a game. I feel you. All right. Okay. Cool. It's time for the top 3. All right, once again, if you can believe it, my number 3 pick of the most disappointing game of the year is actually exactly the same situation as my number 4. All right, and you're going to understand why when I show you what the game is. Ladies and gentlemen, the number 3 most disappointing game of 2023 is Sonic Superstars. Why Sonic Superstars? Well, Sonic the Hedgehog had not seen a mainstream 2D game actually come out since Sonic Mania. And Sonic Mania was absolutely insanely good. It was everything retro that you would have wanted from Sonic the Hedgehog, okay? Even had the retro graphics, a discounted price because it played like an older game. So there you have it. Sonic Superstars attempted to basically take the formula of Sonic Mania and put it into a full 3D engine, as you can see right here. And I'll be honest, some of the stages in Sonic Superstars are very innovative. You're seeing one of them right now. This is actually one of my favorite stages of the game, where it has this whole 8-bit aesthetic, only done with modern graphics, and it actually has great gameplay elements and really cool visuals, and I like that stage of the game. I wanted to showcase the fact that this game is not atrociously bad, all right? The problem with Sonic Superstars is twofold, okay? Number one, it came out in 2023 when its direct competitor, Super Mario Wonder, also came out only like a week or 2 weeks after. Number two, this game sold for full retail price. Unlike Sonic Mania that had come out years before that was sold at a discount, this game was selling for a full $70 at launch. Or was it 60? It was either 60 or 70. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, I'm going to be honest here. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This game is 5 hours long. 5 hours long. Now, once you beat it, there's a little bit of optional content that opens up at the end if you want to go back and do like these master run stages. There's a few extras, so maybe you'll get another extra hour or two out of it, all right? But 5 hours of gameplay in 2023, charging full retail price, is completely and utterly unacceptable. To make matters worse, on top of that, okay, sadly, some of the stages aren't good. Some of the stages are way uninspired and not that interesting. I've made an effort to try to show you one of the best in the game, but actually I'd argue that half the stages just aren't that fun. What is fun? Well, you can change characters. You can play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, or Amy, and each of them have a different gameplay mechanic. However, if you play as Tails, the game is incredibly busted and super easy. So you probably don't want to play as Tails because it makes the entire game so dang easy. Okay? And a game like this, again, it would have been great if it was a $40 release. I probably wouldn't even have had it on this countdown if it was like a $30 or $40 release. But for them to have the balls to try to charge $60 to $70 for this game is ludicrous. Again, why? Because of the year. 2 weeks after this game came out, or maybe even a week, Super Mario Wonder came out. Do you want to know how much content Super Mario Wonder has? 17 hours for exactly the same price. 5 hours of Sonic, 17 hours of Mario, same price. Do you see the difference? You can't even try to justify the price tag of this game. It is absolutely ridiculously overpriced. So, if you're talking value, maybe if you got this game for free, you think it's amazing. But anyone who had to pay for it, there's no way you can justify the value. And even, wow, Darth Goldbach says he just looked it up. They're still charging $60 for this. The price hasn't even dropped yet. That is insanity, you know? Oh, by the way, I will call this out. The final boss is frustrating. It has multiple phases and no checkpoints whatsoever. And again, for a modern game, to have a final boss that's frustrating with no checkpoints is a pain in the ass, because you have to restart the whole boss fight from scratch and redo 10 to 15 minutes of gameplay to get to the end of it every time you die. So, yeah, it's very disappointing. It's upsetting. Sadly, I wish that it was better. I mean, how sad is it that I can concretely tell you this? Sonic Mania, from how many years ago? 5, 6 years ago, is a much better game than this. It has a much better value than this. Has better replay value than this. And quite frankly, I think it actually looks better too. I'm showing you the best looking stage of the game, but I think that the retro look of Sonic Mania looks better than them taking this game and putting it into modern graphics. I think this game kind of fails with the modern graphics. So, Sonic Mania, great. Sonic Superstars, a huge fail. By the way, they were not made by the same studio, even though you might think, oh, it was because it's the same style. It wasn't. They put this to a new studio. Maybe that's why the game is so short, because the studio didn't have the, basically didn't have the experience to put out as much content as they felt like they would have or should have. But again, man, can you imagine releasing the same exact year, only a couple weeks away from your direct competitor in the 2D platforming genre, and being less than a fourth of the length of your competitor for the same price? That's absolutely insanity to think that that was going to fly, and it definitely didn't. Okay? Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to get to my top 2. most disappointing games of the year. Okay? And what I'd like to do is I would like to go through each of them and show you each of the games and explain why I feel that each of the games is a disappointment. And then I'm going to give you my actual ranking. So I want you to understand that I'm about to show you 2 games, but this is not number 2, number 1. All right? I want you to understand that. I want you to say okay, they're both the top 2, but what was the most disappointing? What was the second most? You're going to find out, but just be calm. All right? Because I know if I show this game, you're like, oh my God, so that's number 2. No, it's not number 2. All right? We're going to talk about each game. The first game I want to talk about in the top 2 most disappointing games of the year of 2023 is Starfield. Okay? Starfield was insanely overhyped by Bethesda. And maybe they needed to do that. Maybe they didn't. After some subpar releases, you know, when Fallout 4 came out many years ago, people were not in love with it like Bethesda had hoped they would be, but it still sold like hotcakes. When Fallout 76 came out, it was broken and a buggy mess at launch. Over the years, it actually has gotten tons of players because they've improved it over the years. But again, it was considered a failure at launch. There really hasn't been any Fallout content since, when you really think about it. Elder Scrolls, well, let's be honest, we've all been waiting for Elder Scrolls content, and what do we get? Elder Scrolls Online and 17 re-releases of Skyrim. We haven't gotten any new Elder Scrolls content either that we've been craving. So when we found out the reason for this is because they were working on Starfield, everyone says, well, I guess they're really putting all their eggs in one basket. But hey, it's Bethesda. And Bethesda, you always tend to give the benefit of the doubt. All right? Ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing wrong with Starfield. I just want to make this abundantly clear. The game plays fine. All right? It's an experience like you would expect from Bethesda. An open world with RPG elements, with lore, with looting, with combat, and some unique combat elements. Lots of dialogue trees, lots of questing. If you look around this game and you explore it fully, you're going to find tons upon tons of quests and things to do. It's definitely not a game that you can say, I got ripped off when I bought Starfield because it didn't have enough content. I don't think anyone can justifiably say that. The problem was, once again, Mr. Todd Howard overpromised and underdelivered. When they were showing this game off earlier in 2023 and even 2022, oh, there's going to be open world exploration. There's going to be the ability to go to all these worlds and to put down little bases and mining camps and to colonize on them. And you're going to have all this unique stuff in the universe you're going to be able to find. And you're going to have this, and you're going to have this, and you're going to have this. And he was promise after promise after promise after promise. And almost none of those promises are satisfactorily lived up to in Starfield. First of all, look at the game. This is not me showing you a subpar stream. This is how the game runs on the Xbox Series X or the Xbox Series S. You need a high-end gaming PC to get this to run above 30 frames per second because it's frame locked on console. Why? It's a modern game. Even Fallout 4 ran better than this at launch. And that was how many years ago? How is it acceptable to have a new game that's supposed to be a groundbreaking new IP in 2023 and it runs like a choppy mess? There's no way you can accept that. It's just not supposed to be like that. In addition, this game tries new things, for sure. It's got space travel. It's got crafting of your spaceship, right? The problem is, almost every single new element that this game attempts fails. Literally almost every single new gameplay element that's put into Starfield is disappointing. Building your ship is the equivalent of sitting in front of someone with a 1,000-piece model set trying to figure out how to fit this piece into this piece and being intricate. Who wants to do that in a video game, right? Space travel, oh my God. It is such a huge disappointment. It's not fun, and by the way, it's not even needed. Outside of a few times in the plot where you actually have to do space dogfights, you never have to use space travel. You can just fast travel all over the galaxy. You never have to build your own ship because you can earn them through missions or just buy them. So why does it even exist? The whole go to an alien planet, explore for minerals and elements, and build these colonies and colonize, it's all a lie. You don't have to do any of that. You get everything you need during the course of the story of the game. It's there, and you absolutely never need to do it. It's completely superfluous. So what ended up happening was, I feel like they made a game that plays just like everything else they've always done. It plays like Fallout. It plays like Skyrim. It plays like all those franchises smashed together. That's fine if that's what you're looking for. But I think most of us were looking for something new and innovative. There is literally no new innovations in this game that work or are needed. They're all a waste of your time, okay? And that's a major problem. When you have a new IP and you have nothing that's notable in it besides it's the Bethesda formula, how are you supposed to get people excited about that? And so many people were excited for the game, started playing it, and when they got like 20, 30 hours in, realized it's really, damn, it feels just like Fallout. It feels just like Elder Scrolls. It feels like everything else I've played from Bethesda, just with a little bit of a skin over it because we're in space. But outside of that, it's the same game again, and you just lose your excitement for it. I had a hard time going back to the game and actually finishing it, you know? Does it have factions? Sure. Does it have a main story with companions who you get to know and you do quests for them and then you build their affinity? Yeah, like every other Bethesda game. They didn't try to innovate. So I have to ask the question, what took so damn long? What took them so long to make Starfield? It's literally the same formula, the same elements, the same thing you've done a million times. Every time they tried to add something new like gun crafting, you never need it. It's completely worthless. There's an entire research tree and upgrades in the game. Worthless. Don't add to the experience. They're just a time waste, and they make you think like they're important. Come to find out, you wasted all your time and efforts gathering those resources, building or getting those skills to do them. Completely wasted. You could have been doing things better with your time. So it really is sad because I feel like this is a universe that you can get immersed in completely, but it's just not very fun to do it. It feels blah. Like I've been saying this whole countdown. Mid. It's not, oh my god, terrible, but it's not innovative and fun. It's just kind of meh. If I want to kill time, I'll play Starfield, but I'm not expecting much, right? In fact, I'm showing you one of the more innovative missions in the entire plot, where there's a dimensional shift. You can go between two versions of the same base. This is one of the more unique things in the entirety of the game. Everything else just feels exactly like you've played it before in a Bethesda game. On top of that, without spoiling, the plot's terrible. When you get to the end of the game and you see the plot, it's absolutely god-awful to the point where everything you've done in the plot up to that point doesn't matter. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to spoil the plot for those who haven't played it, but it's just like you will spend 40, 50, 60 hours in this game, get to the end of the plot. Well, sorry you wasted all your time. Oh, well, that makes me feel like I really, you know, am valued and cherished by Bethesda as a company, doesn't it? So, not only does it not innovate, does it fail at all its promises, overpromised, underdelivered, runs like crap on Xbox, then the ending also sucks. So, it's like crap after crap after crap. I mean, it's kind of hard to top a game like that, honestly. When you think about it, it's so disappointing for me that it's actually very, very hard to top that game and say something else was as disappointing or maybe even more disappointing than that game in 2023. But 2023 was the year that really this line just kept continuing, because there's another game that I feel was just as disappointing as Starfield, okay? By the way, thank you, Anime Fan, for the super chat, who says it's No Man's Sky, but it's from a AAA studio. That's the only difference. Wow. Well, thank you, Anime Fan, again for another super chat. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the other game that I feel is one of the top 2 worst of the year is a game that a lot of eyes were on, because the last iteration of this long-storied, well-beloved gaming franchise, when it released, was well recognized as being an unfinished and jumbled mess. Okay? So now we were told, this is good, because this game franchise has now been handed over to a group that knows what they're doing. We're given the time, given the resources, allowed to properly do everything the way that they should have. You absolutely will be getting a complete game when you buy it. All right? So, oh, okay. Well, thank God we're not buying an unfinished jumbled mess, because this is such a beloved franchise that's been going for so long. To see it get it kind of fumbled, right? And come out unfinished and really disappointing is just that. So when we heard all this information about the game and you started seeing all the visuals of it and everything, wow, the story sounds interesting. It's a different take, right? It's a different take on this franchise that we've never really seen before. But then it came out. And then I started playing it. All right? And again, I have to say, maybe my opinion is different than yours. And that's fine if it is. I appreciate the fact that people have different opinions. But I'm going to justify everything I'm about to say. Ladies and gentlemen, the other most disappointing game of the year for me was Final Fantasy 16. By no stretch of the imagination, okay? First of all, a PlayStation 5 console exclusive, right? Can't get it on Xbox. And as a console exclusive, you expect it's going to perform well. It does not. This game struggles to maintain a good frame rate, all right? Sometimes it's a smooth 60 and it's gorgeous. Sometimes it's 40 and it's okay. Sometimes it's below 30 and you don't want to play it anymore. Especially if you're in mid-combat, a bunch of enemies. You don't want a frame rate that's going like this the entire time you're playing the game. So if you're going to make it console exclusive, you have to get it to run well on the console it's exclusive to. They did a poor job of that. Okay? Now, there is a saying, right? And that saying is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I feel like for the last maybe 3-4 iterations of Final Fantasy, they've really tried hard to change what Final Fantasy is, which is sad because I feel like Final Fantasy has one of the biggest, most dedicated fan bases of any game franchise because they've been around for so long, right? You don't need to reinvent the wheel when you make a new Final Fantasy. All you got to do is give us an interesting story with some great graphics, some pretty interesting RPG gameplay, toss in all the enemies that we're used to from the past games, but give them more modern versions and iterations. I think you've got a hit on your hands, right? But it just seems to me like they absolutely are determined to try to make these big sweeping changes to this franchise every single game that comes out and make it so far removed from what the original games were. It's almost like they're purposely trying to tell you, if you're a fan of Final Fantasy, don't play this. We're only trying to appeal to a new audience at this point. Don't even care that this is the same enemies, the same spells. Screw all that, because it's not going to play like that, right? This game, they absolutely, positively went out of their way to make it not be like modern Final Fantasy, or excuse me, classic Final Fantasy in any way, shape, or form, okay? How? Let's talk. Number one, a new adult tone to the game. This game drops the F-bomb constantly and thinks that somehow that's a creative decision that's going to change the game's audience or improve it. It does not. All right? Previous Final Fantasy games almost never had that kind of language. This one does. This one has sexual content in it. There's actual sexual actions and things between characters. The game thinks it's funny. A lot of people said, oh, what they were trying to do were go for a more mature tone, like Game of Thrones. Like the game really, at the plot of the game, when it's a bunch of kingdoms all trying to usurp power in this giant map or whatever, that it feels like Game of Thrones, okay? So if you like Game of Thrones, you might like Final Fantasy. The only problem is, number one, Game of Thrones ended like 5 years ago. No one liked how it ended. There hasn't been anything really like it that much since. It's not popular anymore. Maybe if this game had come out 10 years ago, when Game of Thrones was at the height of its popularity, someone might have said, oh, look, edgy Final Fantasy. But instead, it just feels like it's ancient. It feels like it's outdated. It feels like they're trying really too hard, and it comes out as cringy rather than innovative. I don't think the director understands that, because there's such a fan base of people who kiss this guy's butt that he doesn't know that his game is cringy as shit. He actually thinks he made the right decision making it as edgy as he did, okay? The story, all right, is good on paper and actually in parts has really good character development and some really interesting scenes and plots, and sometimes you actually feel emotional. But at the end of the day, a lot of it is very forgettable, and that's sad. For example, I can't even tell you, what's this guy's name? Is his name Clive? I don't even know. I don't remember. And I played the whole game. And I couldn't tell you, is it Clyde, Clive, Clark? I really don't know. But I played the whole thing, you know. Now, I will admit, some of the plot was interesting. In fact, I would tell you the one reason I kept playing this game was the plot. Why? Because let me tell you something about the combat of Final Fantasy 16. Ladies and gentlemen, I am dead serious when I'm about to say this on camera to the internet world in public. In my opinion, Final Fantasy 16 has the worst combat of any Final Fantasy game I've ever played in my entire life. There is not a single Final Fantasy game that plays worse than Final Fantasy 16. This game is a button-mashing mess, okay? This game, once you get farther into it and you unlock all the elemental spells, literally becomes like you're playing Kingdom Hearts 3. Mash the button, do another ability. Mash the button, do another ability. Mash the button, oh, I got an ultimate, do it. Oh, now my other elemental thing is charged. Switch over to that element. Mash the button, do an attack. Mash the button, do an attack. That's the entire game. I wish I was joking, but if you actually check out my playthrough, I beat entire bosses not looking at the screen. I was talking to chat, and I was saying, guys, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to talk with you guys for this boss, and I beat the whole goddamn game like that. And I didn't play it on easy. It's the easiest, most dumbed down, really simple mode. It's like Final Fantasy for play school. It's like, you know how you got Legos, but then you've got, what are the Double-O blocks? This is the Double-O blocks Final Fantasy. But the funny part about that is, it's the edgy adult Game of Thrones Final Fantasy. You combine the dumbest, easiest gameplay with the adult content. How does that make any sense? It makes no sense at all. It's dumbfoundingly stupid. There's also tons of problems with the pacing of the game. Okay? As you are playing this game, it becomes abundantly clear that it's not streamlined in any way because they want to extend the length of the game. The actual story of Final Fantasy 16 is not that bad. The problem is the story of Final Fantasy 16 is only about 20 hours long, but the game is around 40 to 50 hours long. So you might say, well, I don't understand. Why is the game so long? Because the game has insane amounts of padding. There's pointless upon pointless upon pointless side mission that opens up, and if you do it, you'll get a menial reward that you don't need and doesn't add anything to the gameplay experience. There's fetch quests, there's kill a bunch of generic enemies quests, everything that you've seen in traditional RPGs. The problem is this isn't a traditional RPG. It's a button masher. So because it's a button masher, none of it's fun to do. It's not relaxing, it's not chill, it's just boring. In addition, you'll be in the midst of some crazy fun story missions, and then the game will say, oh, by the way, you can't continue with the story until you do these 2 manual missions that are required. They're mandatory. Go collect some items. Go do a bunch of generic talking with characters for 3 hours in a town. Go, kill some enemies in the environment. It completely destroys any momentum the game has. So not only is the story too short and too short-lived, it's too cringy because they tried too hard to be adult for this game. Then if you even want to just keep going with the story, you're not allowed to. You hit roadblocks of boring padded content that make the game not fun to continuously play. It feels like a chore to get through Final Fantasy 16. And that's not a good thing. You should want to continue to play. Instead, you want to go to sleep half the time. And then you gotta fight, and every time you fight, like, here we go again. Dirt, dirt, dirt. Press the button, dirt, dirt. Super simple. It is so disappointing, because if you watch this, you might think this is, wow, look at that combat, right? That's complex. Look at those graphics. It's just not enjoyable. It's seriously not fun. I wish it were. I wish I could tell you this game was a huge improvement. What I can tell you is this. Final Fantasy 16 is a complete game. It is not unfinished like 15 was. Okay? That I can wholeheartedly tell you. If you were looking for a completed experience, this is it. Does it have content? It does. Problem is, to get through the good content, you have to play a bunch of boring, grindy crap content. That's not good. That's not a good look. That's not a good balance. The pacing is so atrociously bad. Multiple times during the playthrough, you're like, wow, I'm not even kidding you. My streams are around 3 to 4 hours long of gameplay. Multiple times during the playthrough, we would have a 3-hour boredom stream. Where, like, we would just, what do we guys want to do today? Because I have to get through 3 hours of crap before we get back to the story. Dan, let's shoot the shit. Let's talk about this topic. Let's just make fun of the game today. We had entire streams. All we did was make fun of the game. Because there was nothing else to do. It was that boring. So, the funny part about all this is, there's people who out there absolutely swear this is like Game of the Year. To this day. Now, at the end of the year, did it win any major awards? No. Did it really get major praise from the media or the Game Awards? No. but it's game of the year, my opinion. Like, what did you like about this game particularly? I can't hear a single person who actually has said to me exactly what it is that's so good about this game that it should be a game of the year contender. You know what they say? Oh, the Eidolon fights, right? Whatever they're called, where you're controlling the giant creatures in this game. They used to be the summoned monsters in previous Final Fantasies. In this game, they're called something different. So it's like, you know, it's Shiva versus Ifrit, and you're button mashing, and giant kaiju-style fights are going down. That's all well and good, and they're fun. Don't get me wrong. They're called icons in this one, I'm told. Not Eidolons, icons. See, I even forgot the name of that because, again, it's so not memorable. That I could tell you, yeah, a few of those fights were fun, but they're too few and far between, and they're not even the whole idea of the focus of the game. You should be caring about the characters. You should be caring about what's going to happen in the story. Now, when can I get to that next giant button-mashing fest with a giant monster beating the shit out of a giant monster to keep me awake? Because I can't stay awake playing the rest of the game, right? That's just... It's so disappointing. After having the disappointment that was 15 being unfinished, I mean, I actually liked 15 way more than 16. 16, I think, out of all the numbered iterations that I have played of Final Fantasy, genuinely is my least liked. The only exception maybe being Final Fantasy 8, because I never replayed that one and I never finished it back in the day when it was new. I would have to play 8 again to tell you if I think it's better than this. But this, out of all the Final Fantasies I've played, I'm embarrassed. As a fan of the franchise, I'm embarrassed that this is what they just put out, and they expected like we were supposed to love this game and say, oh, this is where the franchise is going, oh, this is great. No, I want the next one to literally be completely and utterly different from 16. I don't want the same button mashing, I don't want the same mission structure, I don't want any big icon fights. I want it to be different. You know what? Just fucking make it Final Fantasy again. I'm sorry. Just make it Final Fantasy. You have something going for you that works, that people want. Why are you veering from that formula? Why are you trying so hard to change what people like to be different? If you want to be different, do that. And you know what you should do? Make this game and don't call it Final Fantasy 16. Call it Clive's Epic Journey, Icon Kingdom Battle. And then everyone would have no issue with it. Because the game's not bad, it's just not Final Fantasy. It ruins the franchise by changing it too much and not making it feel like what people really, really want. Give the people what they want, and they will like it. I've never seen a game that's veered more from what people seem to want from a franchise and then be like so shocked that so many people don't like it. I just don't get it. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, you now know all of my disappointing games of the year. But you want to know which one's the most disappointing so we can end this countdown, right? Well, all right. You have to weigh and balance a couple key factors here, all right? Both Bethesda and Square Enix are great game developers. Both of them know how to make great games because they've done this in the past, correct? Both of them have long-running franchises that are tried and true games that resonate with their audiences. Right? They have these long-running fan bases. They have all this stuff going for them. They know better than to make the mistakes that they make. Honestly, they do. And I think what it is they think that they can get away with it because of who they are. Well, I think what's happening is in the modern day, we're starting to see that gamers aren't putting up with it anymore. For example, Starfield, which everyone thought might have ended up being a Game of the Year contender, was not talked about at the Game Awards at all, outside of maybe one quick thing. Same thing with Final Fantasy 16. These were games that when they came out, all of the fans were like, these are going to be Game of the Year. And then afterward, like, oh, shit. Right? It's crazy. I would have told you I thought these games would have been shoo-in for Game of the Year. But they just fizzled out and died out. I don't hear anyone talking about 16 had an expansion. Within the circles of people who love 16, they talked about it. And then within a week, no one mentioned it ever again, as if it never existed. You know. And I feel like that's the fate of these games if they keep making the same mistakes over and over. All right? But, I do have to say, apples to apples comparison. All right? There is one game this year that absolutely positively stands upon the dung pile. The king of shit for 2023. The absolute biggest disappointment, the worst one of the bunch. And I've made my decision. Ladies and gentlemen, the absolute most disappointing game of the year is Hogwarts Legacy. I'm just kidding. The absolutely worst game of the year is for me Starfield. Why? Because this was supposed to be the start of something new. So now, when they're developing other games or whatever, we have a whole new franchise. And it's a whole new lie from Todd Howard. You know what they say? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 77 times. I think there's something fishy here. Okay? Something's up at Bethesda. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I think that Bethesda has lost their way. I feel like the game devs at Bethesda that used to be in charge of making creative games that were unique and fun don't work at Bethesda anymore, or they've taped their mouths up, tied their hands behind their back, and they got them locked up in the broom closet. Because this game is everything wrong with modern Bethesda. Lack of innovation, lack of creativity, lack of vision, lack of even polishing the game before they release it. Over-promising, under-delivering, promising new elements. The elements that are in the game suck ass. It's just... The best way that I can describe why this game is disappointing is the following. This is a statement that I made many times over the course of 2023. When you think of the Elder Scrolls, okay, what do you think of? What are the iconic things about the Elder Scrolls universe? First thing that comes to mind, oh man, well let's see. You got dark elves, you got the ogres, you've got magic and goblins, you got the medieval combat, dragons flying in Skyrim, you got the iconic villages, right? I mean, we could keep going. There's a million things that you can think of, right, that are very iconic about the adoring fan, sure. We could keep going. You know, the skooma, holy crap, skooma, that's a running theme, right? We could sit here for like an hour and just come up with all the iconic, awesome things that came out from the Elder Scrolls franchise that are memeable, that are part of pop culture now. Gaming pop culture, that is, correct? Okay, great. Now let's think about Fallout, the other major first-person RPG franchise from Bethesda. What's iconic about Fallout? Oh my god, you got the vaults, you got Vault Boy, you got Nuka-Cola, you got the bottle caps, right? You got the ghouls and the glowing ones, you got the friggin' dialogue trees, the epic clans and factions that are going at it, right? We could talk about these things forever. People are still going on about Elder Scrolls Tunnel Snakes, Sweet Rolls, Khajiit, everything. We could talk about this forever, right? And we'd have a fun night just discussing all the amazing things out of Bethesda that they've done over the years in those two franchises alone. Now, I want you to completely forget about Elder Scrolls and Fallout, and I want you to say, name all the iconic things out of Starfield right now. The food cube things. Do you see what I'm saying? Well, you're in space. That's not the same. You understand? Like, when you really think about it, there's nothing at all iconic, original, fun, or noteworthy about Starfield. That's the problem with Starfield. When you're making a new IP and you're a game development company known for making these innovative, unique, memorable experiences, and you put out Starfield, claiming it's your big new IP, obviously things have gone awry. This is the most uninspired, boring game. You can literally never play it and not miss anything. You could play through the whole game and feel like you wasted your time playing it. There's no reason to play Starfield. If you've played Elder Scrolls, if you've played Fallout, go play your favorite Elder Scrolls or Fallout. You're going to have way more of a fun time re-experiencing your favorite universe ever than playing Starfield for the first time. And that's bad. In fact, that's the worst case scenario, because we were saying earlier in 2023 that this could have been the make or break year, correct? The make or break year for Bethesda. I think it broke them. I'm going to be honest with you guys. When the next big Bethesda game comes out, whether it's Elder Scrolls or Fallout or whatever it is, I think people now are not going to give them the benefit of the doubt and trust them. I think this game sold solely on pre-orders and things, everyone trusting Bethesda to do the right thing with this franchise based on what they'd already promised. But that game is so underwhelming and doesn't live up to any of those promises. Are you going to believe Bethesda again? That they're going to come out with another game? Where did the good game developers go? I really want to know. Where did the time and the money go in this game? And where did the good game developers that made Fallout and Elder Scrolls go? Did they work on this game? I'm curious, because I don't understand how the game came out this way if they did. It literally feels like they just copied everything from the past. And you know what? Here's another really good way to describe this game. Imagine that you have an amazing work of art, right? Let's say you have, I don't know, the Mona Lisa. Everyone knows the Mona Lisa painting. Debatable if you think it's pretty, but you have the Mona Lisa painting, right? So you have the original and you're staring at it. It's a work of art. So now you go to a photocopier and you put it down flat and you make a copy of it. And you hang the original up, and now you take the photocopy and you put it down and you make a photocopy of the copy. And you take the next copy and you make a copy of that copy. And then you make a copy of the copy and the copy of the copy 20, 30 times. By the time that you're done making a copy of a copy 30 times, that copy comes out and it looks like a jumbled, blurry mess. It doesn't look anything like the original Mona Lisa at all. That's Starfield. It's the same rehashed systems, the same dialogue trees, the same factions, the same questing, the same first-person gameplay. It's all the stuff you've already done, regurgitated the 40th time, and it doesn't feel fun or unique anymore. It just feels like a waste of your time just to go through and say you played a video game. That's the problem with Starfield, okay? And my Ruin just said, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's the Bethesda way. Well, you can only do the same thing as much ad nauseum over and over until you just stop having fun doing it, okay? I didn't have fun with Starfield. I started at first with this hopefulness that it was going to be original and different. And once I got about halfway into the game, I realized nothing about this game is original and different. Let's just advance the story. And when I did and I got to the story end, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. That's the best they could come up with? That's pathetic. I couldn't believe what they did with this game and how badly executed it was. So for me, by a long shot, this is the most disappointing game of 2023. All right? So ladies and gentlemen, let's hope for the best. Let's hope that in the future, Bethesda will come out with a better game. And let's also hope for Final Fantasy 16 that Square Enix has learned from this experience and will kind of go back to more of its roots and not pump out another game just to change it for the sake of changing it. It sure would be great, wouldn't it? Now, I would like to hear your takes. If you're watching this on demand, please leave some comments on this video. Do you agree with my takes? Do you not? What games did you find disappointing that maybe I left out of my countdown? Or are there any games that I just listed that you're staunchly against being listed in the disappointing games? Tell me why. I'd love to have that discussion. I'd love to have that dialogue in the description of this, or in the comments of this video. That's what it's all about. All right? I'm open to listening to other people's opinions and have them maybe change mine or influence mine. But at the same time, man, I've been doing this for 15 years. That was a really disappointing year for some of these games. I couldn't believe that they came out in that state and were that bad. And I'm sorry that we can't have more good games. The good news is there are great games, and we will talk about that in a separate video. But for now, this is Darkside Phil saying thank you for watching the most disappointing games of 2023 countdown here on DSP Gaming. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next year when we'll wrap it all up again. Peace out, be safe, and I'll see you all later.